Now what are we looking at? We're looking at Neb. Cortex bots. Modulo, Cortex bots, as you'd expect.
Yeah.
Let's go. So normally,
Interesting that Modulo is starting back here.
yeah, I did notice it was slightly different. I guess it's a more defensive posture.
Yeah.
I don't know Modulo as a player. Maybe he just likes to play it safe, not safe earlier, and not avoid taking damage.
He seems moderately aggressive from the games I've played.
maybe
Does
it's
like his incisors.
maybe it's because of vehicle opening.
Yeah.
I know Neb does quite like being aggressive. Very standard. Generally, when I'm doing these, I like to somewhat zoom all the way through, get an idea of like the basic themes.
Yeah, same.
And note them down, and then head for go for whatchamacallit. Go more in depth. Red spot opening, I'm fine with it. I like red spots. And one con full grunts, all good.
We've got a commander expansion against a vehicle expansion. You haven't got that far through the replay yet.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I know Neb likes to keep his commander at home.
Yeah.
Personally, I prefer having it out on the map, but I'm also suck at 1v1, so.
Yeah. I also prefer to have my com out on the map, but I know very good players like Goopy who prefer to keep it in base.
Yeah. It's definitely a little mistake. He's playing no radar, which I'm not a fan of, I think.
Neb.
Yeah.
He has a radar on that hill, but
Noticed.
not in his primary base, on the other hill, near his expansion.
Yes.
Yeah. With his grunts, it looks like he's falling into a bit of a trap that a lot of players do, where he just has his grunt sitting in the middle of nowhere rather than in his base near something.
Yeah.
That is something I've spoken about with him before.
They were not defending anything, defending the open ground. One of them here would have protected this mechs, one of them over here, and then he'd have been completely fine, I think. He knew what he was up against. Like, he could just had one here and been chilling. And all the rest could be across the map.
Yeah.
This is something to think about. And sizes, as you expect.
Something else worth calling out. I've called this out before, but his expansion pattern on this map, it walks to like the furthest, like most isolated maxes. If we compare it to like Modulo, who walks his commander straight to the 3 maxes nearby, that's about the same walking that distance as Neb had to do for the radar and the 1 max, but he gets 3 maxes in that. And it's in a more defensive position because they're the furthest maxes away from Neb.
So are you saying that you'd prefer him to be going for these mexes rather than this?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Or the mexes directly behind, because then he gets another mex on the way or something like that.
So this way, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, then one grunt here and one grunt with that con, and he's pretty much safe.
Yes.
It allows him to expand down this way with that con if he wants to as well.
Yeah.
And the next con can come over here and then do wins or whatever, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a thing I dislike. If he's got his commander at home,
Mm.
Like, unless he plans to move his commander out immediately after making this nano, there's no point in making this nano.
Yeah.
It's the whole point of the whole argument for keeping the commander at home is that it means you don't need to make a nano.
Yeah. I mean, if it's scaled to additional mexes by this point, he could make use of it, but not right now.
This is big overchase.
Yeah.
2 rovers. At most, you send 2 grunts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Inefficient expansion paths, but that's what happens when you draw circles. Should be this or something. And doing not a lot on the other side of the map. And losing stuff here. With a quite large investment into units.
Yeah, because those 4 grunts that are defending have gone and away from anything.
Yeah. One single grunt, just like I quite often like to send a single grunt just to follow an expansion bot.
Yeah.
If one of these was just right clicked on this, he'd be chilling. We wouldn't have lost that mex. He wouldn't have to move this back.
Yeah.
He might lose this radar. I'm not sure.
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah. See, this grunt was fine here.
Yeah.
Oh, it was in a perfect spot, right where it was, and they moved it.
Yeah.
Instead of moving these ones.
It's a blinded attack. He does kill the laser tower, which is good.
This is good. That was quite a lot of grunts he lost. But I think pulling these out of position to allow this to happen, I think, is probably worth it.
Yes. Although Good Micro would have had only some of them pulled out of position, there was an LLP there. And there is a base that can put out in sizes fairly quickly. What does he do with those grunts there?
These ones, well, I hope he does like a line. He just goes this and then out or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't want him to come directly out. I'd want him to at least scout the other group of mexes.
So something
but not
more
engage
along this
them,
line.
probably.
Check. I mean, if it's undefended, you go for it. So I would check it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, because there's a radar blocking the line of fire of the laser tower, you could probably sneak in behind that and kill that, like, get up and close and personal,
you could get 2
and
mexes.
kill the laser tower.
You get 2. I mean, you could get 2 mexes and the radar with 1 grunt. Good micro.
Yeah, or you could get all of them, including the laser tower.
Yeah.
If he walks his commander in.
Yeah. Anyway, at home, scaling is fine. Should have expanded a lot more, but has made some. The 3 rovers doing as much damage should never be allowed to as much damage as they did.
Yeah. And that should never just sit on the left. That should I'd have worked that past and hit the 3 mexes behind.
100%. Close the solars as you run past, and scouting is fine. Should have been a little bit more on the ball of not losing them, but we can't be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
In this position, what would you do here? In this, like when you were sitting here with Neb's position, you know, he's got a bunch of incisors.
Yeah. It's a hard call because it looks like Neb has more incisors than him, like more power in the incisors. I'd kind of try to gauge what Modulo is trying to do with his incisors, which would
Hmm.
mean primarily like incisors do have a speed advantage, but it's not so big that he can just engage whenever he wants to, I think.
Hmm.
So I would try to find where his incisors were and try to judge what play he's making, and possibly focused a bunch more on scaling and playing like a little bit more defensive to my side. Um, and then jump back into units because like he has reasonable concept of Modulo having an eco advantage in that he's lost a bunch of mexes and he's only killed a couple of Modulos.
Yeah, killed
He knows
these.
where the expansion is from Modulo, so I mean he doesn't know all the mexes that Modulo has built, but it should be enough to know that to guess that Modulo has a significant income advantage
Yeah,
over him.
yeah,
I mean, I'm assuming
fairly
there's an income
sizable.
advantage, but
Yeah,
that's part of what I'd assume.
29 to 20 on metal.
Yeah,
He does have more energy. Oh, he's got a res spot out. That's why he has more energy.
yeah. The other thing I'd make a play for is now that I've got a contart, I drop another one and move my com to the front line.
Yeah,
In positions where you're trying to play defensive rather than aggressive, com on the front is extremely powerful for shutting down that aggressive. Probably
yeah,
I'd probably walk it to the east front because your grunts are going to have the maximum advantage on the hill, and so you put your com on the east front and the grunts on the west front,
yeah, yeah.
something like that.
The commander basically says this bit
Yeah,
is impossible
yeah.
as far as
You'd
incisors
need
are
a bunch of
concerned.
LLTs to do that,
Yeah,
but that would be fairly wise. You've also got a constructor out there that could like start that process. Um, that one too, but I'm more thinking the other one closer to
ah,
the
yes,
front.
I didn't spot that.
That one can drop a radar exactly around there, I guess, and then maybe drop some laser turrets a little further forward, not too far forward. You're at a slight disadvantage, so I'd expect to see some of the map.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, um, probably start dropping LLT so you can shift power to the other side of the map where your grunts will have more of an advantage.
yeah.
And then once you
Grunt's
have the
sitting
advantage
just
from
behind.
there, you can invest in thugs or something to hold or push that hill.
Yeah, Grunt sitting just behind this hill would be quite effective against incisors.
Yeah. With the raid on west heading straight towards the base again, I wouldn't be heading there.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe at least a lot more cautiously because you know that's where the base is,
Yeah,
and it's probably the strongest point to attack. I'd keep vision on it, sure, but I wouldn't
yeah.
try for actually
Move.
attacking.
Yeah, I agree with moving up to here to spot what it
Yeah,
is. He's invested in LT there. He has a con there. He's got
yeah,
units there. And this at that point you just dip. You know he's got some units there. Is a big help for you. Probably gets
yeah,
blindsided by these incisors and loses all these. Would be my
yeah.
expectation. I don't like moving these
Grunt,
out.
no, and I don't like moving them so close to the water rather than somewhere where you could spot. Like that radar position that he's opted for means that there's such a sneaky bypass on the edge of the map. He can get very close before you can see him.
I absolutely wouldn't have
Um,
made this radar. Yeah. All of this is wasted.
yeah.
Just
Um,
move down here, and you just get spot up to here, and it gives you so much more warning of sneaking past here.
yeah, yeah. And uh, yeah, especially because you're in a defensive position, you're more looking for a defensive radar than an aggressive radar. What you can get the aggressive radar later.
Yeah,
Also, you should have enough idea of his expansion state by this point to know that he probably hasn't expanded to there. Um,
yeah.
he could have, but probably hasn't.
You're pretty certain he's not going to have anything here. Saying the
Yeah,
grunts down here is I doubly dislike because you know all these are LT'd already. and you know that he's going to have
That
units here.
it's all right, to be honest. I'd have just anticipated him coming in and fighting stuff and started dropping LTs back rather than moving forward with the constructors. You know they're going to
Okay.
have to defend themselves. Factory waypoint would already be over there and queuing up grunts to go over there and defend. He started to grab some things, but like once you weaken a front, and it's best to be proactive in sort of defending it. His incisors going across the map are actually his grunts going across the map are great, I'd say. But I'd so long as he uses them well and doesn't throw them away.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how I feel. Is I don't feel there's any good targets for them. I don't really feel there's much value for him to get.
Yeah, but given the fact that enemy only had 4 incisors over there, he gets information, and he potentially gets primarily information is primarily the value he's going to get. What happens over there is he goes into the incisors and he remains engaged, where best would have been to spot the incisors and back off before he engaged, and then just back out. Rather, he moved sideways towards the LLT, which allowed them to drive into him and engage.
Yeah. A little bit lazy, but it's whatever. Shurikens are out.
Yeah.
I think at this point, this game is over.
It's very much heavily one-sided. But there are still things to take away from this game.
Oh, yeah.
In a sort of defensive position like this, sending out 5 grunts is probably a lot more dangerous than sending out 1 grunt. For concerns like the shurikens or being swarmed by units or something like that, it's a lot easier for him to respond. Also, things like on the east front, where the incisors are driving in, simply just do not engage. He outnumbers you 2 to 1 in units that are 3 times as strong as each of your grunts.
Yeah. Just pull right back.
And so just pull right back. Let him kill the mexes, because you need the army to keep the other mexes alive. If he kills the army, he can just walk through and kill everything.
If he kills the army, you lose all the mexes anyway, so you let some of the mexes go, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll watch a little bit more. Yeah, certainly if I was doing something on this, I'd send maybe 1, maybe 2 grunts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Early game, I think it's better to send more. Later game, I think it's better to send less.
Certainly in the position he was in, where he was like, you're hoping for the other guy getting complacent and leaving a hole. You're not going to be able to brute force.
That engage was all right, especially how he's sticking to the end of the army. That was extremely good.
Yeah, that was a really good engage. Even with shurikens to get that good engage fight against the size, and now he takes a bad engage.
Yeah. All right.
It still
he
works
could have
out.
grouped them a bit more, but it was all right.
It worked out. It was fine.
Yeah. Fighters here, I think, are a huge cost. It's probably a lot cheaper to just invest in anti-airboats. You'd have had them earlier, so the shurikens couldn't have done as much. And then can just walk with your army, and like we can see, like he's got so much metal in storage, he can't use his energy because it's all going into the fighters.
Yeah, fighters are incredibly energy intensive. All areas. 19,000 energy.
Yeah. 19,000?
That's probably includes some of modulos.
That's okay. But just for and his lost a few as well.
Yeah. 11,000 for the
11,000. That's still at least 11 grunts.
Yeah, that's a lot of energy.
What's an anti-airbot? An anti-airbot is 1,000 as well. So
slightly, it's a little bit more than a grunt.
Yeah. The other thing that you could probably do here is just switch into a unit that costs a lot less energy. You have enough energy, for example, to be building thugs or incisors or other vehicles on the amount of energy income that we have.
Yeah, like with this amount of metal, I'd 100% have thought, personally would have thought switching to vehicles, particularly if you want to go into air as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the grunts.
And then the other thing to do is grab your commander and just build souls.
Yes.
Like just a bank of them.
Yeah, I just got this.
It,
That's what I would
yeah,
do.
if you're building vehicles, you probably don't need so many solars. You have enough energy, but for grunts with plus 58 metal, a lot of that's reclaim, but you're gonna be reclaiming for a while.
Yeah.
You're probably looking at doubling your metal income, energy income, which is gonna be a ton of solars.
Yes. I just realised I had Discord on streamer mode the whole time, and it's possibly it's had you really quiet. Let's hope it hasn't.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
Oh well. Well, we'll watch the rest of
Yeah.
this and see how it goes.
Yeah. The other thing I definitely would do now that you're air is scout.
He did make some
He is
scouts.
scouting. That's awesome. That's awesome.
He did make some scouts.
And
was very good.
immediately on seeing this scout, I would have noticed, are those armored mexes on the west front?
There's
Yeah,
two.
they're armored mexes. Okay. And is that an army up there?
Yeah.
On the hill? Okay. I'd have noticed and probably worried primarily about the army. He's sending a lot of units east. Again, just drop defenses and start pushing west.
Yeah. Yeah. My thoughts would be use your commander to lock down one of these sides.
Yeah.
Also
constructors, because you've got constructors over that side. They can build a bunch of LLTs.
Yeah. The commander adds that extra layer of safety with the D-guns. It's so hard for him to engage into it.
And also just simply by virtue of there being fewer spaces on the map to go, because a lot of Grunt's power budget is in their speed, it's not very worth continuing to build Grunts at a point where the map is locked down by both sides.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the reason people stop making grunts and pawns and stuff in 8v8 games,
8v8,
because they die to LLTs really hard.
Yeah.
The map gets locked down and they can no longer find any value.
Yeah.
I don't mind this.
And they die to... You don't mind it?
Yeah.
I
probably want to send everything.
Do.
But he pulled all, half of that, pull all those units back like he did.
I mind it primarily because we know that Modulo has air supremacy.
Yeah.
That's been established multiple times, and so just gonna die to shurikens.
Yes. But it did pull all of the units away. And it gives him time for his own vehicle transition to come into effect.
Yeah.
If it had been less units, it would have been better. He'd have been better off.
I think if Modulo had responded to that correctly, what he would have done with it is just pushed with half his army.
Yes.
Like the army is slower than the grunts anyway, so the grunts have gone past. So I just push with his army, and then let units coming out of the base kill stuff, because he knows it's easy enough to shut down the grunts with shurikens or pounders or whatever he throws out, that he can get far more value by just pushing across the map at neb space rather than going back in and trying to catch units that are faster than him. And so that would have made that bypass basically worthless if Modulo had responded to that in that way.
Yeah, I agree. Shall we have another look to see if there's anything specific?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about like the early game opening, but I think mostly it comes down to having a little bit more patience and slightly optimizing that expansion.
Yeah.
It's probably important to note that a lot of the radar usage
Battle
um
started.
is not especially useful and probably could sacrifice the early radars for a few more early mexes.
Hmm.
Um, because scouting grunts across the map are much more likely to find the army, and a lot of the radar's vision is not that useful, especially if you just park grunts on the constructors.
Yeah.
Build the further back mexes so that it's further away from the enemy, so it's even harder to get that, and they have to go through like you to get to your mexes, kind of a thing.
Yeah. So you
Um,
think first expansion up this way?
yeah, I'm not sure whether it's strictly better to go that way or the one behind him.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Um,
You said first one this
but
way. Yeah.
yeah, but
Um,
the first two cons should go those two directions rather than one forward and the
yeah.
other
Yeah.
backwards like
There's
that.
there's no nice triple mechs to go to from here. It's all long
Yeah,
walks,
yes,
and it's less defensible.
yeah,
Um, I think you can park a grunt here and you can park a grunt here, and you're safe from any
yeah,
early, like actual early game things.
yeah. And then the rest of the grunts should be directly defending something
Yeah.
or maybe between things so they can go to defend something, but certainly
Yeah.
not in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Um, they want to be as close to as much of your stuff as possible, so they're in this
Yeah.
best position to defend.
The grunt's ideal position is either here or here.
Yes.
Anywhere else is bad.
Yeah.
Um, how do you feel about the first one going across the map?
I against vehicles, it's all right. Against ticks, I'd be like, you send all of them or you send none of them.
Yeah, but you don't know. You don't
Um,
know. That's the thing.
but and because you don't know, I'd send all of them or
Okay.
none of them. Um, typically,
Yeah.
what I tend to do is I'll keep like 5 to 10 at my base, and then send all of them at once across the map. Um,
Hmm.
it gives me less information earlier, but my build's going to be the same regardless of what I'm against by that point.
Yeah.
Um, it's sort of a cost of being core bots that you just sacrifice that information and flexibility early.
Yeah. There are two grunts here. They could be here. And it would just be so
Yeah,
much. Everything would be nicer. So
even
yeah.
better, they could be directly beside the mexes near the commander, or you could have
Yeah.
one near the mexes near the commander and the other one sitting near the constructor.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So one of the things I'd said in one of the very earlier games I'd watched of his was that he'd gone for a fairly aggressive opening with
Yeah,
I think he went like one con into many grunts, and he balled up 3 or 4 grunts before sending them across,
yeah,
which I disliked. If he's planning on sending them all across at once, like all of them across, you just want to get them there.
yeah.
Um, if you're doing an aggressive opening, you need to be aggressive with it. Was my thoughts.
And as far as I don't I'm not really fond of a bot's opening against a vehicle opening just because it's so difficult to play. But I think your biggest advantage when you've got vehicle bots against vehicles is your line of sight. And that's
Hmm.
best exploited on home turf when you've got access to radar.
Hmm.
So I tend to play bots against vehicles extremely defensively, because that's where my biggest advantage is. Um, and it's sort of an even playing field. When I'm on their territory, they use their information to outspeed me and get wherever I'm going first. While when I'm on my territory, I don't outspeed them, but I can still get wherever they're going first because they have so little information. They don't even know where I am and
Yeah.
where to go, so it takes them longer to get there.
Yeah. The fact that
Scouts can
this,
nullify that to a certain extent, but you can kill the scouts.
yeah, the fact that this got in is criminal.
Yeah.
It should never happen.
Yeah.
So the thing
Just
about,
don't chase them, really.
yeah, don't chase.
It's not worth.
You stick a guy here, whatever it is, wherever it might be, and just let him run around looking for holes, and just don't give him any holes.
Yeah, and as the number of grunts increases, then you can slowly sweep areas of the map and just push him out of there and then close them off, and he can't see what happens behind your wall of grunts.
Yeah, exactly. But you never want to be chasing them. Chasing is horrible.
Yeah.
Deny him getting in the first place. Yeah.
The other thing I want to see is like his early constructors, because what does he do with his early cons coming out?
So this is the first con. Went straight
Yeah.
went to build this radar, went to build this mechs. That was what he did.
What happens with his second and third?
Let's see. So I feel he undermade cons early on, myself.
Yeah.
This map is fairly large. You could definitely go 2 cons before units. Or one
Before
con,
mass
one
units,
yeah,
one con,
one
two
con, 2
grunts,
cons. Yeah,
another con.
yeah.
And then
And then you can go heavily into units. But he did make a resbot, which I guess can kind of half. Oh, there's a second con.
okay, there is a second con.
I don't. I think he did go. Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, that third con, I'd probably just keep it on building wind generators until floating wind generators and metal.
Losing the red spot. That's painful. Yeah, leaving these things undefended.
If you're wanting to get the
problem.
commander out. Yeah. If you're wanting to get the commander out, the best time for the commander to move out is like immediately. After that, I'd probably advise to commit to keeping the common base. Just for the consistency of it, it works better with itself. Like there's actually places for the commander to go and expand. Like there still is, it's just so far the commander would have to walk to its first max, for example.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to keep something like slow like the commander in base. But then I just wouldn't add that extra con turret yet. Because it's competing with the comms build power. And you don't need that much wind this early anyway. Just keep adding wind generators slowly.
Yeah. Like, especially if you've gone for a
with the 2 expanding cons.
Especially if you've gone for a res bot as well. It's so much energy coming from the res bot on a map like this in the early game.
Yeah.
You don't need to be powering out the wind turbines. And you're +9, well, +15 metal. Whatever it might be.
There's probably a point to be made about the sheer number of grunts you have on the map as well at this point, versus the number of incisors he has. How many incisors does Modulo have?
6.
This is 6. What if we select all his grunts? How many of them are there?
There's 20 grunts, and he's just lost a couple.
Okay. In this kind of a case, with that many grunts, would be way better if they were all across the map.
Yeah. Because
in the same way that he's pulling his army away, which to defend a laser tower, it's not that worth it. You could have all those grunts across the map. They could swarm his other LLTs and just swarm out his maxes. The grunt you've got across the map could do that, but if you had the rest of the grunts across the map too, that would be great. He's actually got a 4th expanding constructor at the moment.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I think because of the walking distance, that the value of that 4th constructor is relatively minimal, and
Mhm.
especially if it's going to make him more raidable. But the other thing is, like, this is the point at which he has enough grunts where he could clear out the map from scouts. Like, if he drew a line across the map even diagonally with a
Yeah.
scout grunt, that would leave no gap for scouts to get through.
Yeah, for sure.
So they could all be pushing across the map right now.
Yeah. I mean, so much of this was because of the misplays in the early game defense.
Some of it, but then he's just left them
Well,
sitting there.
it's ended up as a like psychological thing
Yeah,
that he's now thinking there's going to be rovers.
yeah. And so you just build a line and
Yeah.
like the emergency services is like looking for a dead body. They just form link arms with
Yeah.
each other and just walk across the ground. Like, do that with your grunts and just sweep them out so there's nowhere to hide, and then
Yeah.
you don't have to be afraid.
Yeah. Leave no gaps, and you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, certainly if like these 13 grunts, I mean, they can't all be over here because some of them are just being built. But
Yeah.
if like half of them were here, all of this dies.
Yeah. Well, even if they're like just halfway across the map right now,
Yeah.
they're in a position to pressure immediately after they finish dealing with the other ones,
Yeah.
which is barely enough time, maybe. It's a huge amount of pressure that he's not quite well equipped enough to handle.
Yeah. Particularly if he's keeping incisors bald. Modulo does seem to
Yeah.
have a habit of moving his army, of not splitting his army much, as well as he could.
Yeah. And there are great benefits to that in certain ways, but there's also weaknesses that can be exploited, like just
Yeah.
spread your army out and avoid the ball, and you can attack everywhere else.
Yeah. Barely gets that LT.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy just keeps running.
The other thing I like to do in that kind of a case, and not just keep running, but stay away from those space and anything
Yes.
that can reclaim you or shoot you.
Yeah.
The other thing I like to do, in that kind of case where you've got the information advantage because incisors can't see much, when you're doing raiding like that, bring in a res spot, and you could like just sneak in, reclaim all that, and get out.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
really
goodness.
powerful against vehicles.
Yeah.
So long as you keep it out of sight.
Yeah, for sure. We did actually discuss that, of bringing a res bot along for raids like this.
Yeah.
I think I mildly prefer the starting position up here. It gives your commander a nice
Yeah.
expansion path.
It does.
It's really defensible.
Yeah.
It gives you several nice expansion paths.
Yeah.
While being hard to raid. Yeah, and a really good raid opposition.
Yeah. It's also a relatively decent starting position for like a late bringing your commander out to expand. Like the first two constructors go towards east, and then your commander goes towards west, and then can eventually have another con sync up with it, and then build heavy defenses on the
Do you
hill.
mean commander going this way?
Yeah,
Yeah, north.
yeah, because the mexes are relatively close to each other on that path versus the path you
Mhm.
might go from a different base.
Yeah, yeah, I do like this starting position.
Yeah.
More than this. But yeah, I think. Is there anything else we wanted to see from this game?
No, I think after this point we talked about everything as it came up.
I think so. Yeah. It was mostly, I think, it was the early game defense, I think, that was the biggest problem. The early game defense
Yeah.
and the expansion paths,
Yes.
which kind of fed into
It's
each
really
other.
tempting to just start forward on most maps, and I'd probably do it anyway because I love getting units in the enemy base. But there's a minimal advantage to it on this map.
Yeah.
And a lot of disadvantage.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Well, I think that's all for this replay.
All right. Can we check out the 3-minute one?
Yeah, we can.